There comes a moment in every soul's journey where the noise of the world becomes too loud, the distractions too demanding, and the opinions of others too heavy to carry. You keep showing up for everyone else, pouring from a cup that's been empty for far too long, thinking that if you just give a little more, maybe they'll finally see you, love you, value you. But I came to interrupt that cycle tonight. I came to speak to the version of you that's been waiting for permission to turn inward, to focus, to heal, to reclaim, and to rise. The version of you that God's been calling back to center. You've been fighting battles that were never assigned to you, entertaining conversations that steal your peace, wasting energy proving your worth when God already validated you in silence. Sis, this is not your season to seek approval. It's your season to shift. And that shift begins when you stop outsourcing your joy and start investing in your wholeness. It starts when you silence the noise, shut the door, and choose you not out of selfishness, but out of obedience. Because your breakthrough requires your full attention. So tonight, I dare you to bring your energy back home. Redirect it, reclaim it, refuse to give it away to anything or anyone that doesn't water your becoming. You are too powerful to be distracted, too called to be drained, and too chosen to be chasing things that don't carry God's signature. You're not broken, you're becoming. But becoming requires focus. Becoming requires stillness. Becoming requires that you shift your energy and set your eyes back on you. There's a weight that comes from constantly trying to make yourself understood, from bending your voice, your truth, your story, just to fit into the limited lens of someone who never intended to see you fully in the first place. You explain, then re-explain. You go home and rehearse how you said it, wondering if maybe your tone was wrong. Maybe you were too passionate, maybe too quiet, maybe not enough. And in the process, you chip away at your own confidence, cutting yourself down to bite-sized pieces just to be digestible to people who don't even have the appetite for your calling. But what if I told you that you owe no explanation to those who are committed to misunderstanding you? What if I told you that their misinterpretation of your purpose doesn't dilute the oil God placed on your life? You have spent too much time trying to clarify who you are to people who only ever came to question your authenticity. Their ears are not trained to hear your truth because their hearts are not postured to receive it. They don't want clarity, they want control. They want you to shrink so they can feel big. They want you to doubt so they can feel wise. But God never told you to make yourself small for the comfort of the crowd. He told you to stand tall in your truth, even if it makes others uncomfortable. And the moment you stop explaining yourself, you free yourself. You free yourself from the cycle of validation. You free yourself from the prison of people-pleasing. You free yourself from conversations that go in circles but never produce peace. Because here's the truth. When people are committed to misunderstanding you, they will twist your silence into arrogance and your words into attack. You can't win in their court because the trial was never fair to begin with. The verdict was pre-decided and your character was never really on the table. It was their insecurity that was being projected onto you. So while you're out here trying to clarify your character, they're looking for flaws to weaponize. You're fighting for connection and they're gathering evidence to convict you of a crime you didn't commit. It's a losing game. And you weren't created to play it. You were created to live in truth, walk in purpose, and rise in power, not to exhaust your energy convincing people of something they already made up their minds about. You don't need to chase after the approval of people who only celebrate you when you're silent, obedient, and easy to manage. The ones who clap when you're quiet but flinch when you start to find your voice. The ones who loved you until you started loving yourself. The ones who supported your brokenness but resent your healing. You've outgrown that circle. And it's time to stop trying to fit where God has already caused you to evolve. They don't understand the new version of you, not because it's wrong, but because they were never meant to go where you're headed. And if they were committed to truly knowing you, they would listen, not just hear. They would lean in, not pull back. They would ask questions, not make assumptions. God is shifting your life in a way that won't always be explainable. You're walking in favor that won't always be logical. You're experiencing transformation that can't be summarized in a soundbite. And some people will get uncomfortable with your shift because it reminds them of the parts of themselves they've been avoiding. So rather than do their own work, they'll attack yours. Rather than celebrate your growth, they'll question your motives. But don't let their fear become your burden. Don't let their confusion become your crisis. You are not called to carry the emotions of people who refuse to do the emotional work. Every time you feel tempted to explain yourself to someone who's already labeled, you remind yourself that their perception is not your assignment. You were not born to fit into the image others had of you. You were born to reflect the image of God. And God doesn't require explanation for what he's doing in your life. He just requires obedience. Obedience even when it offends others. Obedience even when it disrupts old connections. Obedience, even when the people you love don't understand your shift. You don't have to pause your purpose to pacify someone else's insecurity. You don't have to make your assignment smaller so others can feel bigger. You are not arrogant for setting boundaries. You are not cold for choosing silence over unnecessary dialogue. You are not rude for protecting your space, and you are not wrong for choosing your peace over their projection. Sometimes walking in purpose looks like walking away from arguments that don't serve your destiny. Sometimes maturity means choosing not to explain yourself at all, but simply letting your growth, your fruit, and your peace speak for you. Because when your life starts speaking for itself, the people who matter won't need an explanation. They'll see the evidence, they'll feel the shift, they'll respect the silence because they've done the work themselves. You don't owe access to everyone just because you once shared your heart with them. Some connections were seasonal, not eternal. Some conversations are better left unanswered. Some explanations, no matter how well-intentioned, will only water seeds of doubt planted by someone else's insecurity. And if you keep digging up your peace, trying to plant understanding in hearts that are not ready, you will keep bleeding where you are meant to be blooming. There is a sacredness to silence when you know who you are. There is a strength and restraint when you know your value. You don't have to attend every argument you're invited to. You don't have to participate in every narrative spoken about you. Let them talk, let them wonder, let them assume. Because the ones who are meant to walk with you won't require performance. They'll recognize your fruit, they'll hear your heart, they'll feel your shift and still choose to stay. And the ones who fall away, they were never holding you. They were only holding on to the version of you that no longer exists. So let them go without guilt, release without explanation, and rise without apology. Your future doesn't require their permission. Your healing doesn't need their cosign, and your purpose will speak louder than any rumor ever could. There is a certain power that comes with peace, a quiet strength that doesn't scream to be noticed, but settles like oil on your spirit, reminding you that you're not in survival mode anymore, you're in healing. And when you finally taste that kind of peace, the kind that God gives, not the temporary stillness that people pretend is peace, but the kind that anchors you in the storm, you start to realize just how sacred it really is. You recognize that peace is not just a feeling, it's a realm, a divine space where clarity lives, where your discernment sharpens, where God whispers strategy, direction, and healing. And the moment you realize that, you begin to understand why protecting your peace is not optional. It is spiritual warfare. It is soul care. It is kingdom strategy. Too often, we treat our peace like it's replaceable, like we can just hand it off to anyone who comes around with chaos, drama, or insecurity and expect to get it back untouched. We open our doors to people who come in with confusion, leave their bags of dysfunction in our space, and then expect us to carry their weight while still standing in purpose. And because we're loving, we do it. Because we're loyal, we do it. Because we don't want to be seen as selfish, we do it. But there comes a time in your journey when you have to choose what's sacred over what's familiar. And your peace is sacred. It is the soil where your faith grows, the space where your healing breathes, the atmosphere where your identity is affirmed. And not everyone deserves access to that space. There are people who thrive on chaos. People who are addicted to the sound of dysfunction, who are only comfortable when something is off, someone is mad, or something is broken. And when your peace disrupts their dysfunction, they will try to make you feel like you're the problem. But that's when you know you've shifted. That's when you know God is doing something in you that's no longer available for public consumption. You can't allow your peace to be collateral damage in someone else's war with themselves. You can love them and still create distance. You can forgive them and still guard your space. Because peace without boundaries is an open invitation to chaos. Peace is expensive not because it's hard to find, but because it costs you the version of yourself that keeps tolerating everything and calling it love. It costs you the people who only know how to function in your life when you're tired, broken, or available for their crisis. It costs you the need to explain why you're not answering every phone call, replying to every text, showing up to every invitation. Because when peace becomes your priority, people will start calling you distant, changed, detached. But they won't understand that you finally decided to choose yourself, not in pride, not in bitterness, but in wisdom. Because when you're drained, you can't discern. When you're overwhelmed, you can't obey. When you're anxious, you can't access the strategy heaven is trying to release. Protecting your peace looks like deleting the number, not because you hate them, but because every time they call, you feel like you're suffocating in emotional debris. It looks like saying no and not explaining why. It looks like being okay with disappointing people who were okay with draining you. It looks like resting without guilt, exiting the group chat, letting the phone ring, walking away from conversations that always leave you fragmented. It's not rude, it's responsible. It's not cruel, it's covered. Because peace is not just for Sundays and spa days. Peace is for Monday morning when you wake up and your thoughts are already racing. Peace is for Tuesday afternoon when you have to walk back into an environment that triggers your past. Peace is for Thursday nights when your body is exhausted but your spirit is finally aligned. It's not a luxury, it's your lifeline. The enemy doesn't always come with horns and fire. Sometimes he comes through distraction, through the wrong conversation, through the constant need to explain your heart to people who've already decided to misunderstand you, through emotional vampires who only reach out when they need something but never pour back. And every time you give a piece of your peace to someone who doesn't value it, you chip away at the clarity you've worked so hard to cultivate. You dull your hearing, you dim your light, you distort your direction. That's why discernment must become your default. That's why boundaries must be built like walls around your sacred place. Not to keep everyone out, but to protect what's holy inside. Some of the warfare you're facing isn't because you're doing something wrong, but because you finally stopped entertaining what you used to tolerate. You stopped answering calls you should have blocked. You stopped engaging in cycles that only produce confusion. You stopped apologizing for having standards. And now everything that was feeding off your weakness is scrambling to find a new host. That's not rejection. That's preservation. That's not loneliness. That's clarity. Because sometimes God will strip the noise so he can sanctify the silence. He will pull you back so he can launch you forward. And you'll find that your greatest peace comes not from having it all together, but from finally realizing you don't have to anymore. The greatest gift you can give to your future is a present version of you that's emotionally available, mentally stable, and spiritually aligned. And that only comes through peace. Peace that passes understanding. Peace that doesn't make sense to people who thrive in dysfunction. Peace that allows you to sleep at night, not because everything is perfect, but because you know who's in control. Peace that anchors you when the storm rages, not because you're ignoring the wind, but because you trust the one who walks on it. You protect that kind of peace with your decisions, with your silence, with your priorities, with your posture. Sometimes protecting your peace means letting them think whatever they want while you move in purpose. It means not correcting every rumor, not fixing every misunderstanding, not attending every battle you're invited to, because once you've tasted peace, you won't trade it for validation. You won't sell it for approval. You won't compromise it for company. You'd rather be alone in clarity than surrounded in confusion. You'd rather be quiet in God's will than loud in someone else's chaos. And the moment you decide that your peace is sacred is the moment heaven backs you up with strength, alignment, and clarity like you've never known. When you protect your peace, you stop reacting and start responding. You stop spiraling and start discerning. You stop bleeding in places that were never called to hold your heart. Because peace becomes the filter for every relationship, every conversation, every move. If it disturbs your peace, it doesn't deserve your presence. If it shakes your stability, it cannot stay. Because the healed version of you has new rules. The awakened version of you has new language. And the focused version of you knows that your peace is not just for today, it's the soil for your tomorrow. Energy is one of the most powerful currencies we possess, and yet it's the one we spend the most carelessly. We wake up with a full tank, and before the sun even sets, we've given pieces of ourselves away to things that yield nothing in return, conversations that go nowhere, battles that aren't ours, people who take but never pour, spaces that drain instead of fill. And we wonder why we feel depleted, discouraged, disconnected. The truth is, your energy is not just emotional, it's spiritual. It's not just about how you feel, it's about what you're empowering. Every time you show up somewhere, you bring your essence with you. Every word you speak, every room you walk into, every thought you entertain is an investment of your internal wealth. The question isn't whether or not you're spending energy. The question is, are you spending it wisely? There's a difference between pouring and leaking. When you pour, it's intentional, directed, purposed. When you leak, it's passive, reactionary, chaotic. Many of us are not tired because we're doing too much. We're tired because we're leaking. We're tired because we've left our energy unguarded, open to anyone with a sob story, a crisis, a guilt trip, or an attitude. We're emotionally overdrafting our souls to fund connections that are spiritually bankrupt. You cannot keep investing energy into places that do not multiply your peace, your clarity, your purpose. Energy should produce fruit. Energy should return with interest. If it's not growing you, grounding you, or guiding you, then it's draining you. And that's a transaction you can no longer afford. Some people come into your life like spiritual overdraft fees. Just their presence starts pulling on you, weighing on you, pressing into your spirit in a way that makes you question yourself, shrink yourself, silence yourself. They don't even have to say much. The energy they carry introduces itself before their words do. And if you're not careful, you'll start matching their frequency instead of guarding your own. You'll start adjusting your tone, your truth, your timing to keep the peace, but not realizing that the price is too high. You're paying for their comfort with your own peace. You're funding their chaos with your clarity. That's not love. That's spiritual imbalance. And just because someone needs you doesn't mean they're good for you. Need is not the same as alignment. Presence is not the same as purpose, and proximity does not equal access. Your energy is sacred because it's the expression of your divine identity. It's what God breathes into you every morning to show up, to create, to build, to discern. And if you keep spinning that breath on nonsense, you'll suffocate your calling. You'll be present but not productive, visible but not valuable, surrounded but not supported. You've got to make up your mind that your energy will not be a public resource for people who never sow into your well-being. You are not an emotional vending machine. You are not on demand. You are not obligated to show up everywhere, respond to everything, fix everyone. You are responsible for your energy because what you invest today will manifest in your tomorrow. We treat our schedules with more strategy than we treat our souls. We know where our money goes, but have no idea where our peace went. We track our steps, but never track our stress. We log our meals, but never log our moods. But what if you started getting as serious about your energy as you are about your time? What if you started keeping receipts of where your spirit feels heavy, where your light feels dimmed, where your mind feels cluttered? Where your mind feels cluttered, you'd begin to see patterns. You'd begin to discern what and who is worth the investment, because not every conversation deserves a reply. Not every invitation deserves a yes. Not every problem is yours to solve. Sometimes the most anointed move you can make is to simply disengage. The enemy doesn't always come to destroy you outright. Sometimes he just wants to distract you. If he can't take your anointing, he'll try to take your attention. If he can't kill your gift, he'll try to exhaust your energy so that you never activate it. He knows that a tired warrior is a vulnerable one, so he'll send people, situations, fake emergencies, false obligations, all to get you so busy, so emotionally drained, so spiritually disoriented that you can't hear what heaven is saying. And when you can't hear, you can't move. When you can't move, you can't build. When you can't build, you begin to break. That's why managing your energy is not just self-care, it's spiritual warfare. You have to become intentional about what you let your energy attach to. Everything you engage with either pulls you towards your calling or pulls you away from it. That doesn't mean you cut everyone off or live in isolation. It means you learn to differentiate between divine connections and emotional obligations. It means you stop romanticizing relationships that have expired. Stop revisiting places God delivered you from. Stop watering soil that can no longer produce. It means you stop investing the best of yourself into people who only see you as an option. Energy doesn't lie. You can feel when something's off. You can sense when you've poured too much. You can discern when your light is flickering. Honor that. Pay attention to that. Don't dismiss it because of loyalty or guilt. Your loyalty to God's assignment must be greater than your loyalty to draining people. You are not selfish for being selective. You are not cold for being protective. You are not distant for being discerning. You're maturing, you're evolving, you're prioritizing your future. And when you start showing up for yourself with the same passion you show up for others, your energy begins to flow in alignment with your purpose. You start walking in rooms differently. You stop chasing, you stop performing. You start attracting the right people, the right doors, the right conversations begin to find you because your energy is no longer scattered. It's focused, it's whole, it's grounded in truth. That kind of energy makes demons nervous and destiny respond. When you start to guard your energy like a resource, you begin to recognize that rest is not a reward, it's a responsibility. You begin to plan your peace. You begin to choose your peace over their opinion. You begin to realize that your greatest breakthroughs didn't come when you were doing the most, but when you were aligned the most, when energy alignment is divine alignment. When your heart is at peace, your mind is clear. When your spirit is focused, your path is straight. When your emotions are stable, your vision is sharp. You don't miss what's yours. You don't chase what's gone. You simply flow in a rhythm that is not frantic, not forced, but favor-filled. Everything you're building, your healing, your legacy, your relationships, your clarity requires energy, and you only get so much of it in a day, so you've got to be wise with it. You've got to be discerning with it. You've got to treat your energy like oil. Anointed, limited, powerful. Because when your energy is in alignment, you become unstoppable. Not because life is perfect, but because you're no longer wasting your power on things that don't deserve your light. You're not just surviving, you're stewarding. You're not just doing, you're becoming. And that version of you can no longer afford to spin recklessly. You're walking too heavy. You're carrying too much promise. You've come too far to leak. Healing is not always loud. It's not always visible. It doesn't always come with applause or recognition. Sometimes healing looks like pulling back, disappearing for a while, sitting in the quiet spaces of your soul, and finally listening to the parts of you that you've ignored for too long. It looks like walking away from conversations that used to define you, relationships that used to consume you, patterns that used to comfort you. Healing requires the kind of isolation that most people run from because silence forces you to hear what noise has been drowning out. And in that stillness, God begins to reveal what can no longer stay, what can no longer go with you, what must be broken before you break through. Isolation is not rejection, it's redirection. It's heaven's way of pulling you back to recalibrate your heart, reset your mind, renew your spirit. Because when you've spent years functioning in dysfunction, chaos starts to feel normal. Pain starts to feel familiar. You build a home in survival mode and forget what rest feels like. And so when God begins to heal you, he doesn't just treat the symptoms. He changes the system, interrupts the cycles. He detaches the identities you built around brokenness. And that process isn't done in the crowd. It's done in the cave. It's done in the secret place. It's done when nobody is watching and everybody has moved on, and all you have left is God, truth, and a version of yourself that's finally ready to be honest. Because real healing is messy, it's inconvenient, it requires the death of your former self, the one who learned how to perform, the one who knew how to pretend, the one who smiled through pain and called it strength, the one who lowered standards and called it grace, the one who stayed too long and called it loyalty. That version of you has to be buried in isolation so the healed you can rise in clarity. But we don't like isolation because it feels like abandonment. It feels like punishment. It feels like something's wrong. But what if it's not something wrong, it's something right? What if the silence isn't God forgetting you, it's God forming you? What if the stillness isn't the absence of movement, but the preparation for elevation? Elevation requires weight, and weight requires strength. You can't take everyone with you to the next level because not everyone can handle the atmosphere of your breakthrough. Some people can only see you in survival. Some people are addicted to your struggle. They don't know how to support the version of you that's whole. And that's why isolation is necessary. Because when God heals you, he doesn't just deal with your wounds. He deals with your wiring. He deals with the belief systems that told you love had to hurt, that connection had to cost you your voice, that value had to be earned through sacrifice. And to unwind that, you need space. You need distance. You need divine detachment from everything that enabled your brokenness. In isolation, you learn how to face yourself without the distractions. You sit with the grief, the trauma, the regret, the shame. And at first, it feels like too much. It feels heavy. But over time, you start to recognize that healing isn't about escaping pain. It's about transforming it. You begin to understand that your wounds are not proof of failure, but portals to freedom. And in that quiet space, you stop asking why it happened, and start asking what it taught you. You stop running from the triggers and start unpacking them. You stop judging your process and start honoring it, because healing isn't linear, it's layered. And each layer requires new levels of honesty, surrender, and grace. There are levels of healing you will never reach until you get comfortable being alone, until you no longer crave validation for your vulnerability, until you no longer need applause for your progress, until you're able to look in the mirror and love who you are becoming without needing someone else to agree. That's when healing starts to take root. That's when your identity starts to stabilize, because you're no longer attaching your worth to responses. You're no longer adjusting your truth to fit someone else's comfort. You're finally grounded, finally centered, finally whole enough to let go without guilt, to say no without fear, to rest without apology. And when that healing starts to settle in your bones, you start moving differently. You stop chasing, you stop explaining, you stop trying to prove your heart to people who never had the capacity to hold it. You begin to love in truth, not in need. You begin to speak with clarity, not with fear. You begin to walk in rooms without shrinking, show up without pretending, breathe without carrying the weight of your past on your shoulders. That kind of healing doesn't happen in performance. It happens in process. And process is private. Process is sacred. Process is painful, but it's where the oil is produced. People will question your silence. They'll mislabel your distance. They'll assume your detachment is bitterness, but let them talk. Let them wonder. You're not disappearing, you're developing. You're not hiding, you're healing. You're not giving up. You're giving in to the work that's required to become who God always intended you to be. And that version of you doesn't need everyone's understanding. That version of you doesn't need constant attention. That version of you doesn't seek comfort from chaos. She doesn't beg for crumbs when she was born to feast. He doesn't settle for survival when he was called to soar. They know that what's being built in isolation will carry weight in the open. There's something holy about being alone with God. When the crowd falls away, when the masks fall off, when your identity is no longer tied to productivity or perception, that's when the real work begins. That's when the wounds get washed. That's when the broken places get rebuilt. That's when the little girl or boy inside of you finally gets heard. And God meets you there, not with condemnation, but with compassion, not with shame, but with strategy, not with distance, but with deliverance. He whispers reminders of who you were before the pain. He resurrects the dreams you buried under disappointment. He breathes life into the places you thought were too far gone, and it's in that sacred place that healing takes hold. When you come out of that place, you won't look the same, you won't sound the same, you won't even attract the same. Because your healing will change your posture, your peace will change your pace, your boundaries will change your relationships. You'll recognize red flags quicker, you'll walk away faster. You'll stop trying to convince people to love you and start loving yourself from the overflow of your wholeness. But it all starts in the dark room, where God does his best developing, where he takes the negatives and turns them into clarity, where he strips, prunes, and prepares you to carry what's next. You don't have to explain why you're pulling back. You don't have to justify your quiet season. You don't have to defend your isolation. If healing is the goal, silence is the surgery. And not everyone gets to be in the operating room. This part of the journey is between you and God, between who you were and who you're becoming, between what was broken and what's being rebuilt, between what was lost and what is about to be restored.